Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be here writing this, but life has a way of throwing curveballs you don't see coming. My name's Jeff, 45M, and I've been married to Darlene, 43F, for almost 20 years. We built a life together, 2 kids, a home, memories that I thought would last forever. But as it turns out, I was the only one who felt that way. It started about 6 months ago. Darlene had been acting strange, more distant, more glued to her phone, and always finding some reason to pick a fight with me. At first I chalked it up to stress. Our kids, Jake, 16, and Emily, 13, kept us busy and I figured maybe she was feeling overwhelmed. But then one night she sat me down and said the words I never expected to hear. I think we should get a divorce. I swear my brain short-circuited for a second. We weren't perfect, but I never thought we were that bad. I asked her why. At first she gave me the classic, I just need to find myself nonsense, but after pressing she admitted that she felt trapped and wanted to be free to explore life on her own. Now here's where things get interesting. Turns out her best friend Miranda, who mind you has been divorced 3 times, had been feeding her all this garbage about how women in their 40s deserve to live, and how a fresh start is the best thing she ever did for herself. I asked Darlene straight up if there was someone else. She looked offended. Said absolutely not. A bold-faced lie, but I wasn't about to fight her on it. Instead of begging or getting angry, I just sat back and nodded. Okay, I said. She blinked like she was expecting me to break down or argue. Okay, she repeated. Yeah, I told her. If that's what you want, we'll do it right. But if we're divorcing, we're doing it fairly. She was still quiet, like she didn't know how to react. And I knew right then she thought she had all the power in this. She thought she could call the shots, test the waters, and maybe change her mind later if things didn't work out. But she had no idea what was coming. After that first conversation, I kept things calm. No fights, no arguments, just straight facts. If she wanted a divorce, fine. But I wasn't going to roll over and let her dictate how this would go. A few days later, we sat down to talk logistics. She had this weird energy about her, like she was expecting me to fall apart. Instead, I hit her with some real questions. Who's moving out? Because we're not doing the awkward living together while separated thing. How do we tell the kids? Because I wasn't going to let her spin some fairy tale about, mommy just needs space. How do we split assets? Because I wasn't about to be left with nothing while she went off to her new life. Darlene looked thrown. She stammered a bit and finally said, I just thought we could take things slow. Slow. Now she wanted slow? The woman who had just told me she wanted freedom? Nah, I told her. You made your decision. We move forward. And that's when I saw it, the first flicker of doubt in her eyes. She tried to backpedal, saying things like, I don't want to rush into anything, and maybe we should try a trial separation first. But I wasn't having it. I told her we'd meet with a lawyer, figure things out like adults, and do what was best for the kids. And speaking of the kids, that's where things really took a turn. After I shut down her whole trial separation nonsense, Darlene started getting real uncomfortable. I could tell she expected me to fight for her, to cry, to beg. But I didn't. I just kept moving forward, and that seemed to rattle her more than anything. Then came the big one, telling the kids. I sat down with Jake, 16, and Emily, 13, that weekend. I wanted it to come from both of us, but I knew Darlene would try to spin it in her favor if I let her lead the conversation. So I took charge. We need to talk, I told them. Your mom and I are getting a divorce. Emily's face crumpled immediately, tears welling up. Jake just clenched his jaw. He had that look, like he already knew something was off before we even said the words. Darlene jumped in with her rehearsed speech. This isn't about you guys. Your dad and I just... Jake cut her off. Who is he? The room went dead silent. Darlene's face turned white. What? Jake looked right at her. The guy. Who is he? I swear, I almost laughed at how quickly she fell apart. She tried to play dumb, saying things like, Jake, that's not what this is about, and I just need time for myself. But my son wasn't buying it. Right. You just randomly decided you want freedom after 20 years of marriage. That makes total sense. I won't lie, seeing her struggle to answer felt good. For the first time she wasn't in control. Then Emily broke down crying. Why are you doing this, Mom? Don't we matter to you? Darlene looked at me like she wanted help. But I just sat back and let her deal with it. She wanted this, right? Well, now she had to own it. And for the first time I saw it in her eyes, regret. Darlene sat there, stunned, as Jake and Emily looked at her like she was a stranger. I could tell she wanted to spin the situation, make it about growth and finding herself, but our kids weren't dumb. They saw right through her. Emily wiped her eyes and asked, "Are you still gonna live with us?" Before Darlene could answer, I jumped in. "No, sweetheart. Your mom and I will be living in separate places." Darlene shot me a look like she couldn't believe I was just saying it out loud. But what did she expect? That we'd play house while she explored her freedom? Jake scoffed. "So, where are you going, Mom?" "With him." Again silence. Darlene's eyes darted around like she was searching for an answer. I haven't figured that out yet." Jake crossed his arms. "So you want a divorce but you don't even have a plan? That's smart." I could tell that one stung. She had always prided herself on being the planner in the family, and now she looked like a complete idiot in front of her own son. Darlene tried to save face. "Look, this is hard for me too. I never wanted to hurt you guys." Emily sniffled. "Then why are you doing it?" And that's when I saw it. The full weight of her decision finally started settling on her. She thought this would be easy. She thought she'd tell me she wanted freedom, and I'd either fight for her or be the bad guy. She never expected me to just accept it and start moving forward. And she definitely didn't expect the kids to see right through her. I could tell she was panicking now. But the best part? This was only the beginning. After our talk with the kids, Darlene was quiet. Not the usual annoyed silence she gave me when she was in a bad mood. This was different. She looked lost. Like she didn't expect any of this to feel real. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "We should take our time with this," she said. "For the kids." I just sipped my coffee and looked at her. "How does dragging this out help them?" She hesitated. "I just mean, maybe we don't rush into lawyers. We could figure things out between us first." There it was. The backpedaling. She thought she was in control. She thought she could test the waters, enjoy the excitement of freedom, and then decide if she really wanted to leave. But now that I wasn't chasing after her, she was realizing that this wasn't some game where she got to pick and choose when things happened. "Darlene," I said, keeping my voice calm, "we're moving forward. You wanted this, so I'm making sure it happens fairly. You get your freedom. I get mine." She swallowed hard. "What do you mean your freedom?" I smiled. "I mean, I'm not just sitting around waiting for you to figure out your life. I'm making my own plans." She didn't like that. Not one bit. Darlene's whole demeanor changed the second I mentioned my plans. She shifted uncomfortably, crossing her arms like she was trying to hold herself together. "What plans?" she asked, her voice tight. I shrugged. "Well, if we're divorcing, I'm moving on too. Looking at a new place, making financial arrangements, figuring out my future." I paused, then added, "You know, the same freedom you wanted." She didn't like that. At all. Her face twisted like she'd bitten into something sour. "I just don't think we should rush into anything. The kids are still processing." "The kids deserve stability," I interrupted. "And part of that is knowing that when you make a decision, you stick to it." She clenched her jaw, clearly frustrated that I wasn't bending to her will. I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She wanted the option to leave, not the finality of it. She thought I'd be devastated, that I'd wait around, that she could keep me as a backup just in case. But no. I was done being her safety net. Then came the moment that really sealed it for me. She hesitated, playing with the edge of the counter, then blurted out, "Are you seeing someone?" I almost laughed. "Excuse me?" "You're talking about moving on so fast," she said, eyes narrowing. "Is there someone else?" I stared at her, completely baffled. The audacity. "You asked for a divorce, Darlene. Now you're mad that I'm taking it seriously?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no argument. No excuse. Just a face full of regret that she didn't expect to hit this fast. And honestly, felt great to watch. After I shut down her ridiculous, "Are you seeing someone?" question, Darlene just stood there, gripping the counter like she needed it to keep her upright. She finally muttered, "I just didn't think you'd move on so fast." I raised an eyebrow. "Move on?" "Darlene, I haven't even started yet. But I will." That hit her. Hard. I could see it in her face. That moment where it really started to sink in. She thought she had all the power in this situation, but now? She was realizing she had none. She wanted me to sit around, broken and miserable, so she could feel like she had options. But instead, I was treating her decision like it was final. She bit her lip, then tried another angle. "Well, what if we don't divorce right away? Maybe we just separate for a while and see where things go." I almost laughed in her face. "There it is. You want to keep me as an option?" I asked, tilting my head. Her face turned red. "That's not what I'm saying." "Yes, it is," I said. "You want freedom, but you don't want to lose me completely." You want to go out there, have your fun, and still know I'm here just in case. She looked down, completely silent. That told me everything. I leaned in a little. Darlene, I'm not your safety net. You wanted this, so you get this. There's no pause button. No second guessing. No waiting to see how your freedom works out before deciding if I'm good enough again. She swallowed hard. No, I cut her off. You made your choice. And I'm making mine. And that's when I saw it. The full weight of her regret hit her all at once. Her freedom didn't feel so exciting anymore. Darlene stood there, staring at me like I was some stranger. Like she couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. Like she never expected me to react this way. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. She was scrambling and I just let her sit in it. After what felt like forever, she finally muttered, I just don't want us to do something we can't take back. I let out a short laugh. That's funny because 6 months ago, you didn't seem too worried about that. She flinched. Jeff, I didn't mean for this to. I held up a hand. No, you did mean for this. You wanted this. You had months to think about it before you dropped it on me. And now that I'm actually accepting it, you don't like how it feels. Her eyes started to get glossy. That's not true. Then what is it? I asked. You got your freedom. You should be happy, right? She didn't answer. Just stood there with her lips pressed together like she was holding back tears. But I wasn't going to comfort her. Not this time. Instead, I kept going. You thought you could leave, play around with your options, and then come back if it didn't work out. But that's not how this works, Darlene. You don't get to have me as your backup plan. I never saw you as a backup plan, she shot back, her voice breaking slightly. I tilted my head. Then why are you hesitating? Why are you trying to slow this down now? Silence. She had nothing. Because she knew I was right. 4 months, she had been writing this fantasy in her head, the one Miranda fed her, the one where she got to have the excitement of being single without the consequences. And now she was realizing that her safety net, me, wasn't going to be there when she fell. Then after a long pause, she finally whispered, I don't want to lose you. And that's when I saw it. The regret. The full weight of what she had done. The problem was, it was too late. I exhaled and looked her dead in the eyes. Darlene, you already lost me. Her breath hitched. She took a small step back like the words physically hurt her. And for the first time in this entire process, she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. Darlene just stood there, frozen like she had just been hit by a truck. I swear, I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out a way to undo everything. But there was no going back. You don't mean that, she finally whispered. I crossed my arms. I do. Her bottom lip trembled slightly, and she blinked fast like she was trying to stop herself from crying. Jeff, we've been together for 20 years. You can't just. Just what? I interrupted. Just accept the divorce you asked for? Just move on the way you said you wanted to? She swallowed hard, struggling to hold my gaze. I didn't think it would be like this. I shook my head. Of course you didn't. You thought you had all the time in the world. That I'd sit here, waiting for you to figure out if the single life is as great as Miranda made it sound. I let out a short laugh. But here's the thing, Darlene, you don't get to string me along while you play around with your freedom. She clenched her fists. That's not what I was doing. I just raised an eyebrow. No? Then tell me, why are you suddenly unsure? Why do you now want to slow things down? What changed? Silence. She knew the answer, but she couldn't say it. Because the second she did, she'd have to admit the truth. She never expected to actually lose me. Then, after what felt like forever, she finally blurted out, because I'm scared, okay? I just stared at her. Scared of what? She wrapped her arms around herself. Of being alone. And there it was. Not some deep realization that she had made a mistake because she truly loved me. Not some heartfelt confession about wanting to fix things. She was scared. Of what? Having to actually live with the consequences of her choice. Wow, I muttered, shaking my head. That's not my problem, Darlene. She looked genuinely hurt by that. How can you say that? We built a life together. I nodded. Yeah. And you threw it away. Tears started spilling down her cheeks. I didn't mean to. I cut her off again. Yes, you did. You just didn't expect it to hurt this much. She started full-on crying now, covering her face with her hands. But I didn't move to comfort her. Not this time. She had made her decision. Now she had to live with it. And for the first time she actually understood that. Darlene stood there, crying into her hands, her shoulders shaking like the weight of her own decisions had finally crushed her. But I just watched. No comforting words. No reassuring touch. She wanted freedom, right? Well, this was part of it. After a few moments, she wiped her face and looked at me with red, watery eyes. Jeff, I think I made a mistake. I let out a slow breath and leaned against the counter. Yeah. What part? She sniffled. All of it. I just stared at her, waiting for her to really say what was on her mind. I could tell she was struggling, like she wanted to take back everything she had done but didn't know how. I thought I needed something different, she admitted, voice shaking. I thought maybe I was missing out on something. But now that I see what this actually means, she swallowed. I don't want to lose our family. I don't want to lose you. I folded my arms. You should have thought about that before you told me you wanted a divorce. She winced like I had physically slapped her. I know. I don't know what I was thinking. I let Miranda get in my head. I cut her off. No. You don't get to blame Miranda for this. You made this choice. No one forced you. She shut her eyes, fresh tears slipping down her face. I know. And I regret it so much. I tilted my head. Why? Because you suddenly love me again? Or because you didn't think I'd actually move on? Silence. That hesitation told me everything. She didn't expect to feel this much regret. She thought she'd be out living her new exciting life while I stayed here, waiting. And now that she saw that I was the one moving forward, she was scrambling to hit the brakes. I shook my head. Darlene, I don't know what you want me to say. She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I moved away. That seemed to shake her even more. Please, she whispered. Can we try again? Can we go to counseling? I don't want to throw 20 years away over this. I laughed under my breath. You already did. Her lip trembled. I held up a hand. No. You don't get to break something and then decide after the damage is done that you want it back. I exhaled. Darlene, I spent months thinking I wasn't enough for you, wondering what I did wrong. You left me in limbo while you figured things out, and now that I'm actually moving forward, now you suddenly want me back. She looked down, ashamed, because she knew I was right. And for the first time in our entire marriage, she was the one begging for another chance. But I wasn't going to give it to her. Darlene just stood there, breathing heavily, her hands gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was still streaked with tears, her lips slightly parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. For years, she had been the one with control in our relationship. The one who set the tone, the one who called the shots. And now she was begging. I never thought I'd see the day. I know I messed up, she whispered. But Jeff, please. I love you. I don't want this to end. I let out a slow breath. You ended it. She shook her head furiously. No, I thought I wanted something different. But I don't. I just got caught up in this idea that I was missing out on life. That I needed to do something before it was too late. I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly were you missing out on? She hesitated. And that told me everything. I took a step back, looking at her with nothing but disappointment. You thought the grass was greener? I said quietly. You thought there was something better waiting for you. And now, when you realize that's not true, now you want to come back. She swallowed hard but didn't deny it. I shook my head. That's not love, Darlene. That's fear. Her breath hitched like I had just punched her in the gut. No, it's not, she insisted. I love you. I just got lost for a while. People make mistakes, Jeff. That's what marriage is about, forgiveness. I scoffed. You don't get to lecture me on marriage, Darlene. You're the one who threw ours away. She reached out again, this time grabbing my arm. We can fix this. We can start over. I'll do anything to make it right. I gently pulled my arm away. You already did everything to make it wrong. And that was it. That was the moment she really broke. Darlene let out a sharp, shaky breath and covered her mouth with her hand. Her shoulders started trembling again, and before I knew it, she was full-on sobbing. Not the little sniffles from earlier. This was real, ugly, uncontrollable crying, the kind that happens when someone finally realizes they ruined their entire life with their own choices. And still I felt nothing for her. I should have. 20 years together. Kids. A home. A life we built. But as I stood there watching her cry, all I felt was a cold, empty detachment. Because I meant what I said. She already lost me. Darlene was falling apart right in front of me, full-on, ugly crying, her whole body trembling like she could barely hold herself together. And you know what? A few months ago this would have broken me. I would have rushed to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay, to fix things the way I always did. But now, I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her unravel. She finally sucked in a shaky breath and wiped her face with her sleeve. "Jeff, please," she whispered. "I can't lose you. I can't lose our family." I exhaled slowly. "You already did." Her lips trembled. "No. No, we can still fix this. For the kids. For us." I shook my head. "Darlene, you didn't think about the kids when you wanted your freedom. You didn't think about me either. Now that it's real, now you want to talk about saving our family?" She looked away, her hands gripping the counter so hard her knuckles turned white. She knew I was right. But she wasn't done yet. "I'll do anything," she whispered. Then she took a deep breath, stood up straighter, and looked at me with those same pleading eyes I'd fallen for years ago. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut Miranda out of my life. I'll prove to you that I still love you." I tilted my head. "Why weren't you willing to do all of that before you asked for a divorce?" She blinked. I don't know." "Yes, you do," I said. "Because you wanted out. You thought you could leave and have some new, exciting life. And now that it's falling apart, you want back in." Her jaw tightened. "It's not like that." I raised an eyebrow. "Then what's it like?" She swallowed hard but didn't answer. "Exactly." I sighed. "Darlene, stop. You're not asking for another chance because you love me. You're asking because you don't like how this turned out for you." Her eyes widened like she couldn't believe I saw right through her. I kept going. "You thought you had options. You thought I'd wait around while you figured things out. But now that you realize I'm actually moving on, you're panicking." She shook her head, tears spilling over again. "No, Jeff, that's not true." I stared at her. "Then why did you suddenly change your mind the second you saw that I wasn't waiting for you?" She opened her mouth but nothing came out. Because she knew. She knew she had played herself. And now she was scrambling for any way to fix it. Then she pulled out her final move, the one she thought would definitely break me. She reached for my hand again, this time gripping it tightly. "Jeff," she whispered, "I still love you." She looked up at me, eyes wide and desperate. Like she knew this was her last shot. I just stared back. And then, after a long pause, I said the words that finally shattered her completely. "No, you don't." Her whole body tensed. What?" I pulled my hand away. "If you really loved me, none of this would have happened." And just like that, I saw the last bit of hope drain from her face. She finally knew. It was over. Darlene just stood there, staring at me like I had ripped her heart out. Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say something, needed to say something, but no words came out. Because what could she even say? She knew I was right. She knew she had done this to herself. And now she was realizing that there was no fixing it. No going back. No reset button. Her breathing got shaky and then just like that she broke. Not just crying, sobbing. Deep, painful, body-racking sobs that shook her shoulders and made her knees buckle. She clutched the counter like she needed it to stay upright. I don't know why I did this," she choked out between gasps. I thought I needed something else. She covered her face with her hands, her entire body trembling. I watched her but I felt nothing. This was the woman I had loved for 20 years. The mother of my kids. The person I had built a life with. But standing there watching her fall apart? She didn't feel like my wife anymore. She felt like someone I used to know. She finally forced herself to look up at me, eyes red, face blotchy, and whispered the last desperate plea she had left. "Can't we try again?" I sighed. "Darlene, I don't love you anymore." She flinched like I had slapped her. "I spent months grieving this marriage while you were off chasing a fantasy," I continued. "I spent months wondering what I did wrong, questioning if I wasn't enough. And now that I've finally accepted it, now you want to come back." She shook her head frantically, fresh tears spilling over. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did." My voice was calm. Even unshaken. "You thought you had all the time in the world. That I'd wait for you to decide if your new life was better. But guess what, Darlene? You ran out of time." Her chest heaved as she struggled to breathe through the sobs. "Please, Jeff. Please don't do this." I'll do anything." I just shook my head. "There's nothing left to do. It's over." And that's when it really hit her. I could see the realization sinking in. The horror of what she had done. The panic of knowing she had made the worst mistake of her life. She thought she could come back. She thought she had the option. But she didn't. Not anymore. She had played a stupid game. And now, she was finally feeling the pain of losing. Darlene stood there, shaking, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps like she was trying to hold herself together, but failing. Her hands gripped the counter so tight her knuckles turned white, like she needed something to anchor her to reality. Because reality had finally hit her. She was losing everything. She reached for me again, her fingers trembling. Jeff, please. We have 20 years together. You can't just. I stepped back. I didn't throw those years away. You did. Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling over. I wasn't thinking straight. I got caught up in all this idea that I needed something else. But I don't. I swear I don't. I just stared at her. And what happens if I take you back, Darlene? What happens in 5 years? 10. Do I just wake up one day and find out you've changed your mind again? She frantically shook her head. No. I swear I'll never. Yeah, I interrupted. That's what you said when we got married too. She let out a choked sob, like the weight of my words had physically hit her. She was breaking. But I wasn't going to save her. Not anymore. You wanted freedom? I asked, my voice cold. Well, here it is. You're free, Darlene. Free from me. Free from our marriage. Free from everything you thought was holding you back. She shook her head wildly. I don't want to be free. I was stupid, Jeff. I was selfish and blind, and She suddenly gasped like she had just realized something. She wiped her face and tried to compose herself, her lips trembling as she whispered, What about the kids? There it is. Her last-ditch effort. She straightened up, forcing herself to look me in the eye. Don't they deserve to have both their parents together? I let out a short laugh. Darlene, don't you dare use them now. She flinched. You weren't thinking about them when you told me you wanted a divorce, I continued. You weren't thinking about them when you decided you needed freedom. And you definitely weren't thinking about them when you were planning your new life without me. She sniffled. No, I cut her off. You don't get to play the family card now just because you're scared. She looked devastated, her hands clutching the fabric of her shirt like she was trying to hold herself together. But Jeff, I love you. I love our family. No, you don't, I said, my voice firm. If you really loved me, you never would have done this in the first place. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Because she knew I was right. For the first time in months, she had no excuses. No justifications. No manipulations left to try. She had played this game, convinced she would win. But she didn't. And now, she had lost everything. Darlene stood there, completely shattered. She looked around the kitchen like she was searching for a way out, a way to undo everything, to fix what she had destroyed. But there was nothing left to fix. Her eyes, swollen from crying, locked onto mine one last time. Jeff, her voice was barely above a whisper. Is there really no chance? I didn't hesitate. No. She let out a shaky breath, like she had been holding on to that last sliver of hope. But now, it was gone. I could see the moment she realized that this was final. That she wasn't going to wake up tomorrow and find me waiting. That there was no pause button, no safety net, no backup plan. I wasn't hers anymore. She took a slow step back, nodding to herself like she was trying to process it. Her hands clenched into fists, then released. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice broken. I sighed. That's not my problem, Darlene. She winced at that, but I didn't care. She had months to figure this out. She had months where I was drowning, desperate for answers, while she played around with her so-called freedom. And now that the weight of her choices had crashed down on her, she wanted me to save her? No, never again. I stepped away from the counter and headed toward the living room. I'll email you about the lawyer and next steps. Her breath hitched. So that's it? Just like that. I turned back to her, my expression unreadable. Just like that. She looked completely wrecked, but I had nothing left to give her. No sympathy. No comfort. No second chances. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt and took another deep breath. Okay, she whispered. Then after a pause she repeated, okay. And then she walked out the door. No dramatic exit. No final speech. Just a broken woman realizing, too late, that she had thrown away the best thing she ever had. And as I watched her leave, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't drowning in pain or betrayal. I wasn't waiting for answers or hoping she'd change her mind. I was free. And unlike Darlene, I knew what to do with my freedom. I was going to move forward. Without her.